lá pelo cabelo. Se for, qual o problema? Problema, né? Já viu o rico namorar pobre?
In this video, my first video, I really wanted to talk about reflection and how you can use reflection as a tool to relieve anxiety and depression. So I devised a book based on the idea of a bullet journal called a bujo. I made a rejo, which is basically just something that I've made up, but it's a reflection journal. So I've done lots of different stuff in here, to-do lists. I've done some pages that are a bit more fancy than others. Let's have a look at the fancy pages. Like that, that's a fancy page. Just, I mean, I don't do that now, but that was just how I was feeling at the time, so I wanted something nice. But then I got a bit bored of that. So, what I do is I do spreads. So, each week, I start a new spread. When I'm being anxious, sometimes I don't feel like I need to do a reflection journal. So, and other times I do. So, I do the week starting, different things I want to achieve, goals. So small goals are really helpful for anxiety and depression because it helps you feel a sense of self-worth and purpose once you've done them, and it helps you stay organised. So I've got my little goals, where they are, there, not very many that week, and then I've got each day. If I'm working that day, then I've got it there, what hours I'm working, just because I'd like to have that, and then I have each day different things that I have to do. So I've got, what have I got to see? So clean the flats ready for the week, because it's so easy when you're suffering from anxiety or depression to just think, oh, I'm not even going to bother with that, and just leave your flat or house to get more dirty. But at the beginning of the week is a really good time to clean it, so you know that you're clearing your space, making your energies feel positive for the week ahead. So you clean your flat on the Monday, and then here on a Tuesday I've got self-care, which is just things like, if I'm feeling a little bit stressed in the evening, I'll have a nice bath with a bath bomb, probably from Lush, and I will sit down with a nice cup of tea and watch my favourite show that I'm currently binging on Netflix, whatever that is at the time, and I'll make sure I've got something nice to snack on, and I'll do like little face mask and moisturise, all that stuff, maybe give my beard a trim, just little things that make me feel nice and that make me feel good for that day. I think something that's really important is if you are feeling low and you're feeling anxious, then it's important to understand that it's okay to feel low, because if you're somebody that does suffer from anxiety and depression, you can't hide from it, you have to really accept it. So on that day, I mean, there's days in here that I felt awful and I've just felt really crappy and horrible, and I've just been like, ugh, I just can't deal with today. So I've identified that, and I've given myself that day to feel low and feel sad and pamper myself, maybe have some nice food, go on a nice activity out, just do something nice for myself. I'm allowing myself that day to feel low and not very happy, and then I'll write it all in here, and then hopefully the next day, because I've given myself that time, then I can start to feel better. Whereas quite often people that are feeling depressed or anxious can try and ignore it a little bit, so they're just trying to get on with life, they increase their stress levels and blah blah blah, and it gets worse and worse and worse. Whereas if you identify you're feeling that way, if you can give yourself just a day to feel low, and then the next day you're going to start over again, I think that's a really good way of coping with particularly anxiety. So for here, on my days, I've got my Monday to Sunday, and on my Monday to Sunday I've got keywords about how I was feeling that day, so it gives me a way of tracking my mood, and it gives me a way of reflecting then, so I can think about things that I did on individual days that have made me feel really positive. That was great, I'm glad I did that kind of thing. So on the next page is things that I'm thinking about. So self-love was something I was thinking about, because I think self-love can be something so difficult to attain that you really do have to put a lot of effort into self-love. It's a lot of being mindful about your thoughts about yourself, not letting negative thoughts in. Sometimes if I wake up in the morning and I'm having negative thoughts in my head, I literally just think to myself, these thoughts are really damaging and hurtful to myself, and I'm not going to let myself think about them because I love myself. And I don't want to be thinking damaging thoughts. I want to be thinking positive thoughts. So it sounds easier than it is, but it's true. You have to think to yourself, these thoughts, identify these thoughts as being damaging to myself, they're hurtful to myself, and I don't want to think them. So you just don't. And it sounds really ridiculous, but it's true. It works over time. It's like mantras. You have to keep saying them, and eventually your thought processes, your thought patterns, then get used to being like, no, I don't want to think that now. And after time, you get better at pushing those thoughts out of your head. So things about yourself, like I'm overweight, obviously. Like I'm not massive, but I'm overweight. And quite often I'm just like, oh, I'm just so fat, blah blah. And then I think, well, you know, I could lose a bit of weight, but I'm not fat and horrible, so I'm gonna not think those things. Thinking horrible things about yourself, like calling yourself fat in your head, is really damaging. You shouldn't be saying stuff like that about yourself. I can identify that, yes, I could lose some weight, and maybe I will do, but focusing on the negatives, being like, oh, I'm fat and I'm unattractive, those are thoughts that I don't want to think. They're hurtful to me, I'm not going to. You focus on self-love, and you can really enrich your life. You can bring in a lot of positivity focusing on self-love every day. So a way that I do that is self-love. Look after myself is one of the first things, isn't it? You've got to really look after yourself with self-love. And that comes into the thoughts. Like, you don't want to be thinking horrible thoughts in your head. You want to look after yourself and think, I don't want those. You also need to do things like make sure your home is clean, because if you're feeling negative about yourself, if you're depressed, you're anxious, you're feeling self-loathing, it's easy to just not bother with the housework, isn't it, that day, and then the next day, the day after that. So, and I'm really bad for that. So make sure my home is clean, because it allows you to feel positive, doesn't it? And then you feel good because you've done something to look after yourself. Make sure I have food for work, because it's so easy, instead of making food in the evening, just going to bed and being like, ugh, I can't deal with that. And then the morning comes and you can't think what you're going to have for work. And then I'm vegan, so there's not a massive range of stuff that I can just make, randomly. So I do have to be more prepared than some people. And my rat's just chewing up his biscuits, so that's what you hear. That's the rat. So I have to be more prepared, because if I get to work and I'm working hard and I'm hungry, it's not looking after yourself. That's not self-love. You want to make sure you're making a nice nutritional meal in the evenings, or all the days, so you've got something to take to work that you're going to look forward to, and then you sit down, you eat it, you feel better, you've rejuvenated your body with the nutrients, and it's just overall, you just need to do it, basically. Do it. So then make sure I have clean clothes. That sounds like a given thing, doesn't it? But when you're feeling like low, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling depressed, you might be feeling negatively about yourself, it's easy to put off little things like put the washing on, and then the morning comes, you've got no clothes, you're stressed. I mean, this happens to me a lot, in fairness. You're stressed, and then you just think, oh, I've got nothing to wear, and the last thing you want in the morning is the stress of the day coming in the morning. Your morning should be focusing on your self-love and your intentions for the day, not the stress of the day that hasn't even started about what you're going to wear. You need to be prepared. It's easier said than done, isn't it, sometimes? So, make sure I eat well, a given, but if you're feeling low and anxious or depressed, a lot of people, including myself, can turn to comforts of food. So most of the time it's comforts of sugar. And, I mean, I'm not that bad, but I'm more savoury than sweet, but it's easy to take more comfort than we should in food. We let food become more of a vice than it should be. And so making sure you eat well, yes, you can have lots of food, but make sure it's nice, nutritious food. Make sure you've made it yourself, and obviously not all the time, but make sure you are making food yourself, making sure you're making your own meals so you know what's in it, making sure that you've taken enjoyment in creating your own foods is just a really positive way to be, really. It helps bring positivity into your life, in my opinion. Making your own food, eat less junk, same thing. Don't think negative thoughts about myself. That's the one, isn't it? Don't think negative thoughts about yourself. What else have we got? And then this is just little bits on my page. So I've got feeling my anxiety that week. Must have been feeling not very well, a bit worse than normal. And my anxiety makes me feel, I don't get social anxiety, I get more health anxiety in terms of my mental health. So it doesn't take much for me to be overwhelmed and feel like I am going a bit mad. So I get like the crazy feeling in my head, and sometimes I have intrusive thoughts, which aren't awful, but it's bloody stressful. If anybody is watching this video who has anxiety, that experiences intrusive thoughts and anxiety, it's a nightmare, it's horrible, and you know, that's how I experience my anxiety basically, more of like health anxiety, mental health anxiety then, because well, it's just you am in it. So what else have we got? I felt a bit lost and in need of soul searching. Well, I'm not lost, I don't need soul searching, but if you're feeling these things, it's important to write them down, because then you can look back on it and think, a bit lost, but I wasn't a bit lost, I just felt a bit sorry for myself and a bit sad, but I can look back on that and think, oh, actually I'm not a bit lost, maybe I don't need soul searching, I just felt a bit low that day, and then I can see it. So yeah, overall it's good. You can put lots of different things in your reflection journals. It's important to get a nice book, like, you know, look for a nice book that makes you feel good. I put a little label on mine saying "Read Joe" because that made me feel happy, and you can do it as a bullet journal. If anybody knows what a bullet journal is, most people probably do, or you can make it as your own little reflection journal. And I think journaling is a really effective and easy tool to use against anxiety and depression. That's my opinion. So there we are. This is my first video. My videos are going to be focused on being relaxing, informative. They're hopefully going to be something that you can watch with a cup of tea and just chill out and maybe talk about mental health and other things. So there we are. Bye bye.